Okay, so we are going to start Unit 3 of AP Biology, which is Chapter 9. We're going to focus on the cell cycle. In other words, what we're going to do in this chapter is we are going to figure out how the cells are going to divide, how these cells are going to reproduce. In other words, when you guys are first born, you start off as a single solitary cell. And over time, our cells divide, and also differentiate so that you become you. Every single one of your cells, guys, is similar, but it's also slightly different than the other cells. So we're going to go through all the different processes. This is a picture of your DNA through the cell cycle. We start off, oops, let me move myself out of the way here. We start here at the yellow, and we will go back to the yellow, but you can see the DNA changing. Does the DNA change with its structure or anything like that? No, it's still the same A bonded to the same T, the G's bonded to the same C. Nothing is going to change there between our base pairing rules. However, the shape of our DNA will change as we go through the cell cycle. Okay, so it's different for unicellular organisms than it is multicellular organisms. If you are a unicellular organism, which you are not, what happens is once you divide, just once, again, you're unicellular, we get a whole new organism out of it. So you're only unicellular, you're one cell. If you divide, you're not going to keep that cell because you're only made of one cell. That other cell is kind of its own living being, and it'll go off to wherever it needs to be. It's kind of crazy when you think of it like that, but that is asexual reproduction. The other one, which is going to be us, eukaryotic cells, and our example would be eukaryotic animal cells. Whenever our cells reproduce, there is a goal for it. Maybe we had a lung cell die, and oh crap, we got a hole in our lung now. Now it would be very, very, very small, so we would just have to replace that one cell. But maybe we are repairing or replacing that area, or you got a big brush burn because you fell on the sidewalk or something like that, you skinned your knee. You're going to have the scab, and then after that, the new skin is going to replace where the old skin was lost. So that's the difference between our cell division and unicellular cell division. But regardless of what type of organism you are, the cells are going to go through a specific cell cycle in order to reproduce. So here's some different cells, guys. You can see them reproducing. Nothing too crazy there. So let's start to get into it. For this chapter, guys, we're going to go over mitosis, and that is going to be our normal cell division. So mitosis is normal cells in our body going through cell division. Later on, we'll talk about meiosis, and meiosis is going to be how our sex cells reproduce, but we're not going to worry about that one right now. So our goal of mitosis, our goal of cell reproduction, is to produce two daughter cells. And if it is mitosis, those daughter cells should be completely identical. For prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, the DNA, and I know we talked about this in the past, the DNA is slightly different. For our cells, we have multiple strands of DNA, and it's linear. For prokaryotic or bacterial cells, this is an example, the DNA, they're only going to have one DNA. And I know they don't have a nucleus, but in the nucleoid region of the cell, the prokaryotic cell, that DNA is going to be all kind of bunched up. Let me show you what it would look like here. Oops. Okay. Sorry, guys. I forgot to put it on the overview. Okay. So prokaryotic DNA, if we were to see it, what it would look like in the nucleoid area, it would look like this. Okay. If we unraveled it, we took that all apart, probably just like Christmas lights, they would get all tangled up. But if we unraveled it, we would see that it would form one big structure. And if we stretch it out perfectly, it would be circular. In my example, I wasn't even going to try to draw a perfect circle, but you guys can see it would be circular in the end. And that's how it would look. So it connects from the beginning to the end. All right. So that's, again, prokaryotic DNA. Eukaryotic DNA, it's going to be a little bit different. Our DNA, okay, it would form lines like that, okay? If we were to separate them, it would not be circular. It would have definitely a beginning and an end. All right, so here is what our DNA looks like under a microscope, kind of right at the beginning of cell division. So you could see we have the nucleus in that area in the middle there. I'll highlight our nucleus for us. I'll use a green color. So there's our nucleus, and inside of our nucleus, that's all our DNA inside of there, okay? During cell division, the nucleus is going to disappear, and we'll see what happens with that later on. So there's two different types of cells, and like I said, guys, this chapter we're going to be focusing on mitosis. Mitosis is going to be normal cells in our body. What we call them, instead of calling them normal cells, we call them somatic cells. These are ones that are not involved in reproduction. Each one of these has two sets of chromosomes. So if you guys have ever heard of different websites like 23andMe and stuff like that, we have 46 chromosomes. Or we could say we have 23 pairs. So 46 altogether. If we talked about them in pairs, we have 23. Your chromosomes are labeled number 1 through 22. And then number 23, we call them the sex chromosomes. So we're not going to worry about them right now. But number 1 through 23, okay, 23 being the sex chromosomes, each one of them, we are going to have two copies or two sets of each chromosome. So if we wanted to look at chromosome number 1, I'll just kind of look here. There's 1, there's 2, and I'll do 3 over here. We would have one of chromosome number 1, and there's a second one of chromosome number 1. Number 2, we would have 2 of them. Number 3, we would have 3. Okay, these right here, this is how the somatic cells would be. We have 2 sets of each chromosome. So that's somatic cells. Gametes, these are your sex cells. They're going to be a little bit different. Here's why. So each one of your cells, guys, again, it has 2 sets. Okay, so we got 2 chromosomes on number 1, 2 of number 2, 2 of number 3. The gametes, your sex cells, they're only going to have 1 of each. Okay, like that. So they're only going to give 1 copy of that DNA. Why? Well, let's say this gamete here, 1, 2, and 3, these are from the sperm, we'll say. Later on, they're going to combine with the egg. Let me do the egg in a different color here. We'll do the egg in blue. Okay. The sperm will look like this, okay? We got 1 of number 1, 1 of number 2, 1 of number 3. The egg will also look like this, 1 of number 1, 1 of number 2, 1 of number 3. When the sperm and the egg unite together in a process called fertilization, that is when they will combine, and that single cell that is formed by the, I wrote blue here, sorry guys. Oh my, I meant to write egg and I wrote blue. It reminds me like of a scene from Liar Liar with Jim Carrey. But anyway, sorry. Number 1, number 2, and number 3, once fertilization happens, we're going to get that chromosome from the egg. And then that cell that is produced is going to have 2 sets of each of our chromosomes, just like a somatic cell. So, big picture here, guys, is two gametes, when they come together, they will form a somatic cell. That somatic cell that is formed when the 2 gametes fuse together, whenever the sperm fertilizes the egg, that first somatic cell was the first cell of you when you came into being. All right. So when you, I guess, started off as one cell, that's the cell we're talking about there. All right. So a few vocab words here, guys. We have chromatid, chromosome, and centromere. So I'll draw you a picture of it. Actually, there's a picture ahead. I'm just going to kind of label it, and it'll make a lot more sense than me trying to explain it to you. So here is a chromosome. And I'm going to draw it a little bit different because this is what it looks like under a microscope, and yeah, it doesn't look very fun. So on the last slide, we talked about chromosome 1, chromosome 2, chromosome 3. We're going to pretend these are somatic cells. I'm going to use the red as the chromosome that came from the sperm, and I'm going to use the blue as the chromosome that came from the egg. All right, so chromosome 1, 1, 1, and 1 for each of those chromosomes for our chromosome that came from the sperm. We are also going to have 1 on each from the egg, okay? When they combine together, guys, and I know you've seen this in the past, they look like an X. Right there. Okay. That area right there where they connect, that is called the centromere. All right. That is where the chromosome from the sperm and the chromosome from the egg, where they are connected together. Why are we connecting them together? Well, we're going to be moving these chromosomes all throughout the cell. It's almost like they're using the buddy system. It's much easier to not get lost if you have a buddy with you. It's the best way I can use to describe it. So, also, each one of these here, let me use a different color actually, here and here, when they are connected, they are called sister chromatids. And it sounds like a jackhammer is going on outside of my door. I love distractions. Okay, so they are called sister chromatids. Now, this big thing here, guys, consists of 2 sister chromatids. So we got one from the sperm, one for the egg. All right. When they are separated, and I know this is going to sound weird and a little bit different than your other what you learned in regular bio. Each one of these up here, we have 2 chromosomes. It would be much easier if we just said, okay, we have 2 chromosomes here, call each one of these a chromosome, but instead we give them the special name of a chromatid. Why? I don't know. All right. So there is your difference between chromosomes and chromatids. All right, this here, guys, is called a karyotype. And I talked about this a little bit on a previous slide. All right. So I said we had numbers 1 through 22, because remember we had like 23andme.com. 1 through 22, those are your normal chromosomes. The last one, number 23, which we don't really say it's 23, those right here, these are your sex chromosomes. Oops. Okay. So how you determine what's going on here is if someone has 2 X's, if they are XX for their sex chromosomes, that is a female. If someone is XY, they are male. Okay? So this person obviously is a male because they have the Y chromosome. Females do not have the Y chromosome. So who determines the sex of a baby? Who determines the gender of a baby? Well, the females only have an X to give. So the females are always going to give an X. But the males have an X and a Y. The males, depending on, and it's by chance, guys, it's always a 50% chance, the males could give the X chromosome or they could give the Y. All those sperm that are swimming toward the egg, okay, 50% of them are going to have an X, 50% of them are going to have a Y. Whatever one fertilizes the egg first, that determines the gender of the baby. So if the male sperm is an X that fertilizes the sperm, if the male sperm that fertilizes the egg is an X, the baby's going to be a female. If the male sperm that fertilizes the egg is a Y, then it's going to be a male. All right. And guys, like I said, it's always a 50% chance. It never, ever changes. So if you have brothers and sisters, let's say you're the oldest one and you're a girl. If you were the oldest one out of your siblings, you're a girl, there was a 50% chance that you were going to be a girl. It always resets. So it's not like next time, if your parents have another kid, oh, since I'm a girl, the next one probably should be a boy. No, it's always 50%, no matter how many kids your parents have. But anyway, guys, that's a karyotype. It just shows us all of our chromosomes. All right. And this would be for a somatic cell. A gamete would have half of this number. So we would only see 1 for number 1, 1 for number 2, 1 for number 3. Okay, so during cell division, when our cells are reproducing and forming 2 cells, given that they only had 1 at the beginning, our chromatids that, remember I said we use the buddy system, our chromatids that were once nicely bonded together, what they're going to do is they are going to separate. I want to draw you a quick picture. Sorry, I'm drawing a lot in this one, guys. We are going to have our cell. Okay. I'm just going to draw a chromosome in the middle. So those are 2 chromatids. What's going to happen is they are going to get pulled apart. All right. And what that'll look like is when they get pulled apart, okay, do you see how I broke that X up in 2? We're going to have one going to one side of the cell, the other one going to one side of the cell, and then later on we're going to have a nucleus on each side of the cell after the cell elongates a little bit. And then those chromosomes will end up in the nuclei. Different ones, okay, because each one will become its own cell. But that's how they are going to separate. And here's just a picture I just drew you guys. You can see the chromatids separating into individual chromosomes and going into 2 different nuclei. All right. So we're going to have 2 different major steps for cell division. Our first one, which is the main one, we are going to go through something called mitosis. And mitosis is literally when we split all of the DNA up, we're going to deposit it into 2 different nuclei. That's going to be, like I said, the major part of it. That's going to be the growing of the cell to make sure it gets a little bit bigger, and then the separation of the DNA. And obviously, we're going to need some more organelles in there. We're going to have to duplicate them as well. Cytokinesis. Remember, cyto means cell. All right, so it has something to do with the cell, obviously. Cytokinesis is dividing that cytoplasm up, making sure, okay, I got 4 rough ERs. I want to make sure that 2 rough ERs go into one cell and 2 rough ERs go into the other cell. It's making sure everything is divided up correctly. Right? And then the other one, guys, we already talked about gametes. Okay, they are going to reproduce by meiosis. That's going to be the reproduction of our sex cells. Okay, so we're going to start to go over the phases, guys. Today was kind of just an introduction to mitosis and getting you used to the terminology, the difference between chromatids, chromosomes, and the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish. So next time we will draw out all of our different phases of mitosis and go through what happens into or in each one of those phases. Have a good day, guys.